Through fusion technology, each microessentials granule is nutritionally balanced to deliver uniform nutrient distribution across the field. While traditional fertilizer blends may contain the same nutrients, they are often in separate granules, making distribution wildly inconsistent. The result? Vital nutrients applied in small amounts, like elemental sulfur and zinc, aren't accessible to every plant. But with more sites for plants to reach the nutrition they need, microessentials more efficiently delivers balanced nutrition to each and every plant, resulting in higher yields and higher profitability.
Again, we sure appreciate having you here. We said this is a very different year here with the Big Iron Farm Show. I really think this is really the only major outdoor farm show that's being held really across much of, at least the Midwest, if not the country here this year. A lot of the other big shows, Farm Progress, Husker Harvest, Farm Fest, some of the other shows even to the eastern side of the country aren't being held this year, but this one is. And we're taking all the precautions. That's why we're in a bigger building this year, to spread things out a little bit. And we're also having a live stream of all of our seminars. So if you want to catch a later seminar, catch this one again later, it's available online. Just go to our website and you'll be able to find the playlist and the link to all of those webinars or seminars that we have going on, our forums. My name is Don Wick from the Red River Farm Network. We've got our whole crew here, and we'll keep you up to date with forums and sessions throughout the run of the Big Iron Farm Show. Our first session, I think, is a neat opportunity to have the ag commissioners from both Minnesota and North Dakota share the stage with us. Doug Goehring, of course, from North Dakota, just coming off of his tenure as president of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. You guys had a kind of a strange annual meeting here just recently as well. And Thom Peterson is with us. We've known Thom for a long time through his role with the Minnesota Farmers Union, and he's in his first year as commissioner in the second year as commissioner, I'm sorry. It goes fast. Yeah. In the state of Minnesota. And first of all, gentlemen, we appreciate you both being here today.
Well, thanks, Don. It's a great opportunity to be here with Thom and with you, and thanks for hosting this. Thanks to Cody Cashman for going forward with it. I mean, when you think about it, what a nice venue. We got 350 acres here, and if we're going to practice social distancing and give everybody 36 square feet,
yeah,
we could have 426,000 people here. I think that's wonderful. So bring them. There's a lot of parking left, but I'm surprised how many are out there already, and we just started.
We're getting there. I'm curious, when we talk about COVID, it certainly has impacted all of our lives, but in the State Ag Department, it's had to have a major impact for both of you. Kind of share your thoughts on that. What impact has that had? Tom, let's start with you.
Yeah, in Minnesota, for our Department of Agriculture, we have almost 500 employees. So a lot of our employees, Doug and I were just talking about this, are able to work remotely. Keep in mind, a lot of our employees are already spread out across Minnesota, as inspectors and other roles that they're in. And so it's been different. We have a lot of our staff is working outside and have really, working from home, and they've really been able to keep up. And I always say, are we getting our work done? Are we serving the people of Minnesota? And for me, the answer is yes, that the employees have adapted. We do have employees that are in the building. I am personally usually about 1 or 2 days a week in the building, and then others, we try to get out. But it's tough. We have a hiring freeze in the state of Minnesota right now in our department. We have a budget deficit, that we'll be looking at, and so trying to maintain a healthy Department of Agriculture that serves our farmers and Minnesotans is tough right now, but it's important too. So,
how about for you, Doug?
Well, I can say that I don't think we really skipped a beat. Probably the first 2 or 3 weeks in March, as we went into this pandemic, we ended up with having probably 80% of the staff out. And then by the time we got into April, we were probably about 80% of the staff in. We had some child care issues we had to work through because of school not being in session. And by, I suppose, the end of May, we were back to about 96% we're in and working. But we have 120 different programs, and a lot of what we do is regulatory in nature. You have to interact, you have to serve people. Somebody's going to answer the phone. I never missed a day, so I've been there every day since, except for today. I mean, I'm still in the office, sort of, but
well, we're glad you're here today. Tom, you had a unique situation with Minnesota, with the processing plants, the hog processing plants in Worthington's the one that was the big one, but the other ones that came to mind as well, where they had labor issues with COVID, first a slowdown and then a shutdown. And we actually got to the situation where we had to euthanize some pigs. Walk me through that whole process.
Yeah, it's really tough thinking back on that, because if you think about COVID, before we even had the shutdowns, our meatpacking industry went through some changes. In Minnesota in 2019 was the first year we ate out more than we ate at home. So our Minnesotans ate out more than 50% of the time. And within the last week in March, we started eating at home over 80% of the time. People weren't buying 20 pounds of boxed beef, they're buying individual cuts, and they're not buying pouches of eggs, they're buying, cartons of eggs. And so that tipped the food system upside down. You saw the shelves were empty. We had the food, it was just getting what we needed to the stores. And so then, so that was tough on the industry. Then we went into, having to depopulate once the plants started closing. It really started with Smithfield, because if you think about Smithfield and Sioux Falls, about 35% of Minnesota's hogs go there to that Smithfield plant, and think about 20,000 hogs a day all of a sudden not having a home. And then a week later, you knock out JBS in Worthington, which is another 20,000 hogs and about 80% Minnesota hogs, and then some of our smaller plants, and then Jenny O, and the dominoes kept falling for turkeys. And so we ended up euthanizing about 350,000 hogs, at least in Minnesota. We gave away another 100-some thousand hogs, and by giveaway, I mean farmers sold them for $20 or less. You'd see these things on Facebook where a farmer, instead of euthanizing, would say, "Come get them." And that overloaded our local meat processing. We put down, euthanized hundreds of thousands of turkeys, millions of chickens. A very tough situation. But the good news is we're, taking great precautions. The plants really did a nice job making workers feel safe and get back into the plants, and we're running good as we speak now.
The whole thing about euthanizing pigs, when you got healthy animals meant to go to harvest, and it's not a factor of, it's a Usually we'd be thinking it's an animal health issue or something.
Exactly.
It's,
And
it was an issue
incredibly
we couldn't
tough on,
process.
mentally tough on farmers, you know, to have to raise and take the care and then have to, is just incredibly heartbreaking.
Thom kind of touches on a lot of that local processing. There are some opportunities perhaps to maybe see more of that done at the local or regional level. Do you see that, Doug?
Yeah, we do. And in fact, to the point that Thom made about people either selling or giving away hogs, it overwhelmed our meat processors here in North Dakota. And with that, it kind of triggered a thought, you know, what about going out and getting some of this CARES Act money? So I approached the Emergency Commission, which is made up of some of the legislators, Secretary of State and the governor, and suggested that we could look at a cost share program for meat facilities so that they could update equipment to enhance efficiencies, capacity, add coolers, grinders, whatever that meant. And to date, I got to say that when we're all said and done, because we're not quite done yet, we should be able to increase capacity in North Dakota by 227%. We had one facility that was harvesting 15 to 20 head a day. When they're done, they will be able to harvest almost 200 animals a day.
Wow.
So, you know, phenomenal. But to that point, if your processing industry isn't prepared, it creates some real challenges. I think the other thing too was the public in general was getting frustrated with going to, and I'm not picking on, you know, Costco, Walmart, Sam's Club, Hornbachers, or Dan's Supermarket, but they were used to going there, and all of a sudden they saw prices shift. They saw, you know, the meat case was pretty bare.
Yeah.
And you had to remind them when they called to complain about no access to meat. You said, "Did you check the local butcher down the street?" And they started to do that, and they said, "Oh my God, the prices, they're reasonable, and we get good quality stuff." So it really did help spur on and promote a lot of our local meat shops, and really helped our producers. And I believe there's some really good things that did come out of this.
You know, Thom, you actually met with a local meat processor shop yesterday, right?
Yeah, I was in Thief River and met with the mayor there. Brian Halmers actually owns Michael's Meats there in Thief River. And so really looking, our department very much like Doug hit it on the nail. You know, there's been some positives in COVID. It's not all, you know, been doom and gloom, although I feel like it is every day. But, you know, our local processing, as Doug said, it was already stressed before we had COVID.
Yeah.
So, you know, having farmers have to wait 9 months to schedule a thing is, you know, so we did like some mini grants too to some of these, you know, our Equal To plants or our customs in the state. We did 46 grants to really speed that up. Same thing Doug's talking about too, where, you know, cutting, saws, storage was a huge issue as people were buying pigs. So I think there's some positives in that because people are, you know, and connecting grocery stores with some of those buyers has been really helpful.
Yep.
Michael's, for example, he's selling to several restaurants in town and all helpful.
That's a great point. We're now starting to see some of our retailers going directly to some of those state-owned facilities and some of the federal facilities that did get the opportunity to expand to supply local beef right into the market.
Nice to see some opportunity. We would say we've got a microphone circulating around. If folks have questions, just give us a wave, and we'll get your questions answered here as well. Certainly with COVID, we've seen less miles being driven. You talked about a lot of your staff being at home yet. We both states have a strong biofuels industry. What impact is that having on the ethanol and biodiesel plants across the region?
Since we're smaller with respect to ethanol, in North Dakota we produce about 500 million gallons, about 500 million, and it had an impact. I think overall when you looked at what was happening in the global market, what was happening with driving on the domestic level, it was putting a lot of pressure and stress on it. And then that, you know, keeps corn price down too, and we just saw everything slipping and moving and not moving in the right direction. It's nice when the summer season came along where you got some more people out there driving around because they weren't flying. I think there's more opportunity going forward now. The other thing is we've seen some efficiencies created within those ethanol facilities. And in fact, we got a couple of facilities that are now looking at carbon sequestration so that they can look at different markets and get a premium for that fuel.
Yeah, it was pretty tough, you know, and I think that's why you see some of the requests in Minnesota. We're looking at trying to continue to look for some kind of assistance for our 16 ethanol plants that we're running. Several of them had to go down. Some of them took their planned maintenance time during COVID, which was helpful. A lot of them pivoted to do hand sanitizer and you know, kind of had to downsize. Most of the plants now are back up and running. We're also glad too, we had 2 plants, Little Falls and Winnebago, or one Winnebago that we hope are sold and getting back online and running through some corn for our farmers. But, you know, just a huge impact, you know, and it also highlighted some of the things for ethanol. For about 6 of our plants, CO2 is an important byproduct, and we were worried about having a CO2 shortage, and that they use that in a lot of the meat plants for euthanizing the animals. And very important for people to see how everything is connected in agriculture. And so it was really interesting. But I appreciate the creativeness our plants did, and to get through this is kind of, you know, it'll be interesting to see, you know, how we are on the other side of this. But good news is back up and running and starting to do better.
Trade obviously is a big deal to all of us. We've had a little nice bump here in the soybean market, with China's gotten a bit more active here as of late. Both states, both Minnesota and North Dakota, have been very active over the years in trade missions, and you've got a very active international market presence. How are you doing that in this day of COVID, when we're not able to travel, we're not able to get that face-to-face relationship with that foreign buyer that we're used to having?
Yeah, for us, it's been rather difficult. We are very active. In fact, I think I had 9 trade missions planned for this year because things are really opening up. It's challenging because you might be able to retain some of your current customers, and I think to a great degree, just the quality of product that comes out of the upper Midwest here has really helped. The problem is it's the new buyers. Generally, it's all about relationships. You need to be engaged, you need to meet with them, they want to see you're committed. It's more face-to-face, and that is challenging. Some of our companies are saying that, you know, at some point in time, we really do have to be out there engaging. We got a couple things going for us now that I think are going to prop up our markets, add stability, and maybe even some growth. I mean, the value of the dollar's coming down. We're starting to be competitive in the global market. We're seeing a few hiccups out there. China got hit with, I think, 2 or 3 typhoons, and you can see just with corn that's being sold. I mean, they far surpassed what they were going to do in the phase 1 for buying corn, and now they're buying that, and they're back involved in buying beans. USMCA got passed this year. We did that agreement. Japan got done. We also got the phase 1 China trade deal done. Great Britain's right around the corner. In fact, that was one of the markets we were going to be heading into, since they've, you know, Brexit is out the door, and they're looking for new partners, and we got to start talking about opportunities and bringing a little more science to the table. I think that'll help us in building that relationship and maybe creating just another ally in the trade war against the EU, who is all about precautionary principles. So there's some challenges going forward, but I'm hopeful that when we get into 2021, we do have some more trade missions going on and more engagement, because we're going to need it.
We've gone to virtual things all over the place. Are you using some of the technology and such to reach out to buyers or anything like that?
We really do. You know, and just saying, like, you know, as I became commissioner too, I was thinking, like Doug was saying, like 9. I think we had several planned for this year, and I spent my first year as commissioner really traveling the state of Minnesota, and I said then the next year, which would have been this year, I was going to do, several of the trade missions, but I saw the ones that I did last year, like we went to Colombia and Peru. The relationships that you make is so critical, and for me being commissioner, I didn't understand the value of that is really important for a lot of our trading partners. They really value our relationships. They, very important. Your commodity groups play an important role in that, a lot of the goodwill. So we've been doing quite a few virtual meetings. I think this week we did the United Kingdom, which is a smaller market, but it's interesting. Taiwan, do a lot with Taiwan. Taiwan had a good announcement last week on that'll allow some beef into there and pork, which is good news. And and just trying to look at, with China, it's been challenging. And so our goal was always to try to fill our smaller buckets, so when that China market really comes back, we also have these smaller buckets too. And so, but a lot of virtual, and they're tough. One other thing you think of is not just us going there, it's them coming here, and I see people in the audience that have hosted trade missions. This time of the year would be a time they really like to come, especially those Asian countries, and see, how it's produced and what's going on. So as Doug said, we kind of do miss some of that in person, so we'll see what happens moving forward, but it's kind of interesting times.
We've got a question. Somebody got a mic. Randy will get to you.
My question is, on these trade deals, is currency, I know you, Doug, you mentioned about the value of the dollar and it helps move our products, but in a lot of these trade deals, especially in corn and beans, we're overproducer of that product, but when the currency in these trade deals, if we don't address the currency difference, like Brazil, the real, compared to the US dollar, we lose every time. So do you guys, really dig into the currency and try to build in safeguards?
So my point to that is I'd like to see the standards and the agreements and the provisions that are put in place for sanitary protocols adhered to. I probably have more concerns about those things that are going on just because of foreign animal diseases. I understand that when we develop a relationship and we have a trade agreement, that it goes both ways. But you also have to make sure that you are accounting for how product is produced and coming into your market. Where is it coming from? We need better auditing procedures in place. I mean, I believe so just because I'm on that side of it watching what's going on in another country, and one state in that country is declared TB free or foot and mouth free, and yet the surrounding states aren't. So what's the audit system that's in place? Where's the integrity? That's probably one of the first things I look at. There are disparagements with currency, and how we account for those and deal with them, I don't know. The person that comes up with that system, it gets into a whole nother conspiracy. But I think just addressing the manipulation of currency and fiscal policy is a big deal. I'd like to see other changes, though, made in our market. And when I think about our domestic market, mandatory price reporting, I think is one of those issues that has been manipulated for the last several years. I mean, we addressed some things in the Packers and Stockyards Act, and then they just found another loophole. So let's put a new model in place for mandatory price reporting to help a lot of our producers. That's more along the livestock side, I would say.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add there, too. I agree. I think it's something that I worked on in my previous job with Farmers Union. The currency manipulation was a really, big issue. And, I think, too, as a commissioner, a lot of times on issues like that, we're working on a relationship, but, we don't also, bring issues, and we spend a lot of time with our counterparts at USDA. But I think it's a good point. I agree with a lot of what Doug said. But
We always think when we're reporting on exports, it's soybeans or wheat, but we're pretty diverse up here. We sell dry beans, we sell food grade beans, we sell a lot of different of those kind of products. How are we getting the message out on some of those more specialty crops?
So there are some opportunities under the Specialty Crop Block Grant to actually fund some marketing and some promotion of those. We also have increased MAP funding and increased export enhancement program money that's come from USDA. That's been helpful. The problem is when you shut down an economy and you shut down a system, it's a little more challenging. To the point you made, are there some things happen virtually? And yes, but they don't quite have the same impact and effect. People want to see when our companies go to different countries and they meet with the buyers and they lay out the commodity, that they can see it, they can touch it, they can feel it, and they say, okay, so this is your best. What are you going to send us? And you're saying, like, our companies are going, no, this is the average. This is the product. And they're just astounded. And they say, okay, so one of the disadvantages that we have, I know Thom in Minnesota's got a little bit better advantage, but for us, 83% of what we send out of state leaves on rail. 13% then is leaving on rubber. And that's a challenge because ours has to go to the Pacific Northwest. We got a lot of freight underneath that, and then it's got to hit another buyer's doorstep, and those are the challenges. The transportation issue is probably one of the bigger ones for us, but making that person-to-person, face-to-face contact, they see our product, they get excited, and it creates inroads.
There's only so much, obviously, you guys can do at a state level when a lot of these issues are big picture, federal and global type issues. I'm curious the cooperation you've had from the federal government, from USDA on working through some of these key issues you've had, particularly in COVID.
Well, I think they've led the way on quite a few of the virtual stuff, primarily because, well, I know Thom and I both work with Foreign Ag Service and with Undersecretary McKinney, who is the Undersecretary for Trade. And they have included us in a lot of those conversations. In fact, when we started talking about trade irritants and we started talking about some of the problems with the protocols for sanitary and phytosanitary, we were front and center with USTR. And that was unique, and it was great because they got intimate, firsthand knowledge of the problems we deal with when they're playing games with, trade technical barriers. And that got us into the room. It got us, it put some of those priorities right up front, and they actually started dealing with them. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, and I just think that, again, as being a newer commissioner, just the importance of the Foreign Ag Service is really impressive when you do a trade mission or you do meetings with them and the work that they do. We have a high-quality product in the upper Midwest, and I think that, as we look at what we're selling around the world, I think that's really important. One of the things we're working on, too, in Minnesota, we've seen, especially in European countries, interest in our water quality certification program we have in Minnesota that we have almost 1,000 farmers in. But we're starting to see some of our companies in Minnesota, such as Land O'Lakes, partner with us and our growers and other companies interested in that, too, is, again, they're selling a product that is certified in how it's produced, and I think you're going to continue to see more and more of that as well, which is interesting. But also USDA has been very helpful on, just in general, a lot of those connections.
You just wrapped up your term as the president of NASDA, National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. I watched as Ag Secretary Perdue was addressing your group virtually. It was interesting because he obviously depends on the state commissioners, secretaries, because he tapped a lot of them to be in his cabinet. From the economic standpoint, trade standpoint, all of those kind of things, are you pleased with the relationship you're having with the department?
I'd say it improves every year. I like the fact that we really are treated as partners and co-regulators because we regulate a lot of programs that that start at USDA. So it's been good because access is there, and you get it all the way from, mid-level all the way up. There's a lot of meetings that we have with the Secretary himself, and he's engaged. I remember having a conversation with him, if anybody remembers when the government shut down, what was that, last December, January? We had people who had FSA loans, and they had gotten a check for selling livestock or a commodity, and it was put on their fridge with a magnet, and they can't deposit it because no one was there to sign it. And I was meeting with Secretary Perdue, and I remember bringing that issue up amongst others. And before that meeting was done, he had his attorneys in the room, and he says, we got to find a way to open these offices back up so we can at least get these signatures on these checks so these people can pay their bills. Huh. And I have really appreciated the engagement and how involved he has been. I do really appreciate that part of it.
Thom, you're on the other side of the aisle. You get the same kind of connection?
Yeah, and I think that's really important to say, as being a Democrat and working with a Republican administration, that kind of what Doug said, I think is really key for me is access, and so as I started out as commissioner, I was always surprised when I get a call from the USDA and say, hey, we want to give you a heads up about this, or, want to know if you, have questions about, and so a lot of our programs, and so we don't see eye to eye on everything, but I think that's what, to me, and then being a commissioner, I take anybody's call, I return everybody's call, and that's really important, and I think that's what has impressed me. And like I said, we don't agree on everything, but it's the ability to work together is important. It was very critical when we had our livestock situation, and we're working on the plants and everything that we're going through. That we're partners, and so so I really appreciate the work and the access that we have with Secretary Perdue, and I also went to the University of Georgia, so I have a good connection with them on that too as well, and so it's it's helpful just to have that relationship.
You got to leverage everything you got.
You do, absolutely. I'll do what I have to do so I get what I can for our farmers, so it's very important.
When we were at Big Iron a year ago, we were looking at a lot of quality issues. Our wheat crop they were still trying to harvest wheat a year ago, and we had sprouting going on. We know we had corn standing all winter. We had a lot of quality issues. WHIP Plus became part of our vocabulary. How would you gauge where we are right now with that program?
Well, I think there's still some challenges going forward, and I know that the state FSA director's here, and we've had numerous conversations about this. One of the things that visiting with the Secretary and with Undersecretary Northey here in the last couple weeks was maybe there needs to be some finality to the WHIP Plus program. It was designed for the 2018 and 2019 cropping seasons, but there was no end date for applications put on there. So as they continue to pay out and there's people that still haven't signed up, it creates an unknown. When are we going to pay out the rest and get on to new business, which is probably a WHIP Plus or a WHIP program for 2020 crops? I mean, we got Prevent Plant, we've had hurricanes, derecho. I mean, yeah. We have some major issues in the country, and Congress needs to step up and do something about it, but we still have this looming uncertainty that exists out there with the WHIP program. And I don't know at what point. I think they have to really think about when do we call for an end date on this. We need to get producers in here and finish signing up, figure out how short we are, and fund it.
At least when I look at the majority of producers still haven't signed up. Why do you think that's the case?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure. Because by the time we got to June this year, we pretty much had the last of the beans and the corn off, at least here in North Dakota, and some of the wheat. I know there was some wheat producers in the northern part of the state. They finished harvesting and then pulled the planter in right behind it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you. I don't think North Dakota is necessarily the problem. as much as it is other states from 2018 and some of 2019.
Tom, your perspective on programs like WIP Plus?
Yeah, very similar, really just tough in northwest Minnesota, and just very similar to Doug. I think just getting some it's been about a year now, it has been a year, and so I think that having some certainty for our producers, or some, I think there's still some lingering questions out there, and I think it was welcome news and everything, but I just, it would echo a lot of what Doug said, and it just kind of what I hear is just continue to be some uncertainty on when we're finishing this or coming to a conclusion. So, and I think it's tough too, because I worry about, for some of our farmers that are going to depend on that. I'd say farmers, when they would go to put their crop in the last couple of years, it's been tough, and so then, cash flow is just really, really tough, and so I worry about this year as well. So whatever we can do to continue to, bring some finalization to that would be helpful.
Certainly, we've had a tremendous amount of federal support related to trade with the MFP, and I think with COVID and those kind of things that we've had a lot of dollars are coming from the government at this point. That's helping us get through 2020. What if that's not here in 2021? What kind of pain do you think we'll see here in ag?
Well, I just say, I'm very concerned about that. I try to do some calls with some of our bankers, because I think it's kind of underlying, and you come to, we don't have as many farm shows and gatherings, but I think I do worry about, because, for a lot of farmers in Minnesota, this is, you're in 5, 6, 7 years of down times. And like I was just saying, that every year has been a struggle, the cash flow. I drove to southwest Minnesota, and I was kind of struck by, I actually drove by 3 different land auctions on a Saturday morning as I went from my farm on the eastern side of the state all the way down to Worthington. I know that Minnesota's moved into the top 5 in farm bankruptcies. We have 1,000-some farmers in mediation right now. We delayed our mediation for those farmers. So I'm very concerned about, cash flow, but the payments have helped. It's not how everybody wants to do it, but that it's helped get people through this year, and and I think we're going to continue to have to highlight the need as we come out of COVID, hopefully, and it's unfortunate and necessary right now.
Doug, have you heard from lenders? What are the bankers saying?
There's still some out there that have enough equity, they can do another round. They can renegotiate and collateralize. But unless they have a good crop and better prices coming up at the end of this season, if they haven't already contracted, it's going to be tough. And at the Bank of North Dakota, we've done some programs. We have the Farm Disaster Program in place. But you're limited. I mean, farmers don't need another loan. They just need some cash, some equity, and it's a little challenging. I hate to forecast going that far out. I'd rather tell you what I think the price is going to be for soybeans this spring versus where are our producers going to be. And it's a bit challenging when I look at just in my own backyard. We were the epicenter for drought this year. And 50, 60 miles away,
Well,
roads were flooding.
yeah.
I mean, township roads, you still can't get around out there. So, yeah, it's a bit of a bipolar system that's in place.
What is the price of beans going to be this spring?
I think we're, if everything holds together right now, this appears to be a bull market. So this last week, I mean, we've seen beans come up $1.30. I think we could look at another $1.30 on these, or even more. But don't go out and do marketing based on what I said.
Tom, you kind of alluded to some of the stress that's going on out there. You guys have been pretty active, the state has, on really trying to connect on some of those issues of farm stress.
Yeah, thanks. And I really want to take this opportunity to thank you, Don, and Red River Farm Network. And for those of you that haven't checked out the transformation podcasts that Red River does are really helpful and, important. I think things like it's a hard thing to talk about. And unfortunately, in my last few years, I've known too many farmers that took their life, and that's just, it's just really difficult. And so Don and I were just talking, I visited with the Commissioner of Agriculture, Jim Nichols, in Minnesota from the 80s. And a lot of the programs we put in the 80s, like we have our Rural Finance Authority that makes loans to farmers, our Farm Advocate Program, Farmer Lender Mediation, all those were put in. We're still using them in Minnesota and as important as ever. And so we have those programs. We have counselors that are free, things that, we're trying to make sure people are aware of. The other thing I've been very concerned about this too is our safety in Minnesota. Many of you probably know in the last year and so we've lost 10 farmers in Minnesota in bins and silos. Very difficult. We've had countless others rescued. And so I think a lot of the farm groups have been working, our legislature worked to kind of highlight the issue. We have a grant program open right now for harnesses and other farm safety. But in talking to a lot of those families that lost somebody, they'll say that they were under a lot of stress. They doing things, and I know from my own farm that, under stress you do things that you probably shouldn't do. And so, yeah, it's a tough issue, but I'm pleased that we do have resources. It's just continuing to get them out there, and people don't be afraid to ask or pass it along.
Doug, did you see that when you're at NASDA, that those kind of issues go across state borders? Everybody's kind of working in that same venue?
You're seeing everybody dealing with this same issue, maybe to a different degree. It all depends. You talk to farmers in New York and Pennsylvania, or I should say I talked to my colleagues there, and they've been talking with their farmers. I mean, when you see almost a couple thousand dairy farms go out of business, that's a big deal.
Right.
And these challenges that we've had with market access, just coupled on top of the stress they're dealing with on the farm, yeah, it's pushed people just over the edge, and we really have just tried to encourage people, don't isolate. I've been there. You get desperate, you get depressed, and especially under these circumstances, I mean, what are we seeing during this COVID period? Suicide rates more than doubled. Substance abuse is more than doubled. Mental health has just degraded, and it makes it tougher when you try to go and order parts, and it used to always be just in time. And I remember this because a guy blew up over the smallest of things, and when you really got right down to it, he just says everything is just so out of whack, and what's the use to even farm anymore? But he was trying to order a part, and he needed it the next day because he generally could get them the next day, and they told him 8 days because everything is so messed up.
Yeah.
So you just feel like the world's against you, and it's not. We're all in this together. Reach out. I mean, call me. I've done calls, and if they don't want to talk to somebody else, but call, I'll hold the phone out to hear while they're hollering, and an hour and a half later, we can have a conversation, But talk to your neighbors, check on your neighbors, and it's a big deal. I've been surprised at some that have taken their life, and you'd have thought there was no reason for them to do that given their situation, but a lot of things can trigger that.
Yeah. Switching gears, probably another fun topic, but state budgets are pretty tight as well. Deficits start becoming part of our vocabulary there too. How are you guys from a state department's ag department handling some of these budgetary concerns?
I was going to listen to you to hear
Okay.
In Minnesota, it's really interesting, but our budget, we've had some really good years, but now we're faced with a $2.3 billion deficit for just this fiscal year that we're in right now, and then a projected $4.6 billion deficit for the 22-23 budget that we're putting together right now. And so we're looking at, having to do cuts at our department. Keep in mind the state budget for Minnesota, less than 1% of our state budget is our budget, the Department of Agriculture. So I try to fight for every dollar I can get because I think you get a good bang for your buck. We've done things like not filled salary. We've had a hiring freeze that saved a lot of money for the department, but it also is tough on employees because that means if we're not filling a position, somebody else has to fill that position. And we have great employees, and so we're mindful of how much work we do, but that's important. So we're kind of evaluating our programs, seeing it like in statute, what we have to deliver, what works, what doesn't work, trying to be creative. And really working with our stakeholders too to understand what's going to be important in our upcoming budget season. But, I think that, it's very, very difficult time. But I've been through it before, not as commissioner, but Minnesota faced, as a government director, we had two $6 billion deficits before, and we came out of it strong. So we'll see, and we'll just be creative. One thing Minnesota has is the Governor Dayton did was we had a budget surplus, but we also have a really strong rainy day fund, and so that'll help negate some of the impact in Minnesota. But we'll just have to keep working on it.
What's the perspective of North Dakota?
So we just issued our budget here about a month ago, it shows cuts, mandatory cuts, but I just happened to be on Teams meeting this morning with OMB, requesting an optional request back. So about 13 things I need to add back in there just because we're an active department. I'm not blessed to have almost 1% of my budget. I'm about decimal dust when you look at the North Dakota budget. I mean, it's over $40 million budget, and yet I've seen Department of Instruction turn back $42 million, which is more than my entire budget. And then they get to arguing about whether I'm spending $168,000 to run operations. I'm like, we're missing the point here. I am asking for one extra FTE, and that's because we had the grain licensing program that switched over to our department. I believe we're doing a good job. We've cut our inspection times in half, and yet there's just a lot of work to be done out there because the legislature asked us to start looking at grain buyers, looking at brokers, and trying to get a good handle on what's going on. So there's a lot going on, and we're going to come in and ask for more, even though there's probably going to be cuts.
The issue of the grain buyers, we've seen both sides of the border as well. We had obviously some situations with a couple different elevator locations and such, and some individuals. You both state legislatures addressed this, correct?
Correct, yeah, and we've made some changes in Minnesota. We've had, of course, like Ashby, Carlstadt up in this area too, and Wadena. We've unfortunately had a few issues, and so our legislature has, made some changes, and I think that hopefully, knock on wood, this year, and even with things being tougher, we're seeing a much better situation, and so we're hopeful, but, I think things are still going to, keep moving around. It's hard to raise fees on farmers when the economy is like it is too, and I think that's something, but some of our programs, they require either a general fund or a fee, and so we continue to look at those issues too, but it's, for us, that's not going to be a big priority to try to raise revenue. If we can hold off, we'll try to do cuts or move things around, but it is good to see our legislature in Minnesota, I think, tighten things up, whether it's reporting with the board of directors on some of the different pieces, notifications. We're doing checking books and different things more often, and to try to avoid, some of those issues that we've had in the past.
What about North Dakota, Doug?
So we've done about as much as we can do to cross-train. We've had a really lean, mean machine there, and I got more staff doing more other jobs, so I really can't afford to. You either have to start taking programs away for us to do our job, or you're just going to have to fund them. And I know to that degree, we're trying to take a different approach, different process, put that in place. For example, I talked about the grain inspection service. We started going out and doing more references, business references. We started looking at the accounts receivable, accounts payable. That starts telling you a story. And we've traced and tracked several other facilities that could have been major issues. But you stop them short in their tracks from what's going on. You try to get a handle on it. You don't try to put anybody out of business. You don't pull their license. You work with them to keep them in business. And you start to find out really what the pulse of the industry is out there. Same thing in the livestock industry. We've had a few hiccups, I'd say. In 30 years, we didn't have any bad situations that took place, but lo and behold, we had a few things blow up this year. And you have to quickly address it and try to keep people in business and try to get funds recovered, but you need resources to do that.
Switching topics, we've seen on the crop side of things, whether it's dicamba or the neonics and pressure coming on, all of those kinds of technologies that we use in agriculture. We're going through a re-registration on dicamba. You guys use a lot of Section 32, some state-specific things. What's your expectation as we move forward on that regulatory side?
I have no idea. I thought we'd have handled this different, the last go-around. We actually met with EPA yesterday and had some great roundtable discussions. One of the things that I'll tell you, and that I'll just convey this from some of the North Dakota producers who have reached out, and it's part of our sentiment in issuing a 24C and how we want to see special local needs addressed in a label. We really, and I think the farmers really want to see something substantive. They want to see real change on that label. Now, either it's rates and it's looking at species and size and timing versus a one size that fits all. Because let's face it, if you're double cropping beans or you're growing cotton, down south, that's a whole different scenario than what we're dealing with in the northern plains. And I know even between North Dakota and Minnesota, we have a different cutoff date when we issued our 24Cs. Those are things we need some latitude and some flexibility, but the biggest thing I'll tell you is I would like to see more flexibility in that label so that we can do different rates. I've advocated for this before, and when you come back with the argument, well, if we allow you to do less rates, then we're going to have a resistance problem. I would argue on the other side. If you're putting that much product down and in the atmosphere, some of the data has suggested 72 hours later, you still have 25 parts per million floating around, you're creating resistance everywhere off the field that we're going to have to deal with. So let us manage appropriately in the field. And quite a few farmers have said, yeah, because the label that we use for every other pesticide gives us that ability to manage appropriately. And I think that'd be a step in the right direction. Otherwise, farmers don't feel, at least a lot of them that I talk to, don't feel that there's a good faith effort put forward in either reformulating or taking a different stab at having a simpler label language for dicamba.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting as we look at, those are some of the toughest decisions I've had to make as with the dicamba label, for example. And then if you look at our cases in Minnesota, last year we maybe had about 20 cases tied to dicamba. We have, well over 100 this year, but we really had none in this area. I don't think we have one north of Otter Tail County. But in Southwest Minnesota, we had a lot of volatilization. We have a lot of investigations going on right now. So I think that we're going to see what happens here in the next month or so with the companies and the re-registration. But I think you're going to have maybe a different expectation with that product. And what Doug's saying, maybe with on the re-registration. And so I think that it's an important product, and I think that it works good for for farmers. And I think that trying to understand that is important. I also want to just touch on the pollinators. I think that's really a important piece in Minnesota that we're putting out a state pollinator report next week, and I have to work with our environmental agencies on that and our citizens, and that's really trying to find some kind of common ground on how we're addressing declining pollinator issues. And so we've been working really a lot on integrated pest management, or IPM, really partnering with University of Minnesota Extension, trying to look at those rates and education components is going to be very important. But as a commissioner in Minnesota, I get a lot of questions on from people on what are we doing to protect pollinators, what are we doing to enhance habitat. The answer is a lot. Farmers are, as I've traveled around the state, even the last few days, this last week, I'm always struck by different conservation practices farmers have on their farm, but it's up to me a lot of times to tell that story. So I think it's going to be an interesting couple of months here before we get into the planting season.
With just probably a minute and a half left, quickly, give me some room for optimism. What are some things you see on the plus side that's happening in this business?
I really think we are blessed and fortunate, and we do have diverse economies. And I know North Dakota is probably even a little more diverse than Minnesota, with 54 different commodities we produce here. But I believe around the corner, we're going to have opportunity to access more markets. The value of the dollar is going down. It seems like maybe our weather patterns are going to shift a little bit. A couple of years prior to this, I was like, just quit raining. Now I got my wish, and it didn't rain this year. So I'm back for a little bit of moisture, but we still have some places in North Dakota that are struggling because just way too much. So I think there's some better days ahead.
Good. Doug left you 15 seconds.
Okay, I just say, as a commissioner, I say my whole day is a challenge and opportunity. So I look at every day, there's challenges in agriculture, and you got to find the opportunities, and there are a lot of them. I'm an optimistic person, and so we have to find those as a commissioners, I think, and try to move ag forward.
We're blessed to have two great commissioners from North Dakota, Doug Goehring, Thom Peterson from Minnesota. Please show your appreciation for their thoughts today. Stick around. We're going to have more forums coming up. Ag Country's got a session on transition, estate planning, those kind of things, and more still to come yet this afternoon. Thank you.